for some applications, if you're going to create a cell line, a blockbuster cell line that's going to make your company hundreds of millions, billions over decades, you need living cells. But
Yeah.
the idea that it was one baby back in the 70s and it was a dead baby and their body was used, and that's terrible, but you know,
See, I think
we're not talking about that for a cell line. Cell
no,
lines are too valuable to, and you just won't get a cell line from dead cells.
vaccinations. What is the link between vaccinations and abortion? Hello and welcome to HLI Ireland's Let's Talk series. My name is Lisa O'Hare. Today I have a very special guest. Many of you will recognise Kathy Sinnott and particularly recognise her voice from very many radio broadcasts, television broadcasts, and indeed prayer campaigns over the years. Some of you may not know that she also served for years as an MEP. Her journey began with her own son having a severe reaction to a vaccination, which led her to really explore the ingredients and which led her further to discover a connection between abortion and vaccines.
I got an incredible surprise when I was, looking up terms like diploid and things like that, to find out that there were human aborted ingredients in there, ingredients from aborted babies. And that was that was probably more than 20 years ago. And at the time I found, we didn't have Google, Firefox and whatever. Anyway, I found a group called Children of God for Life that were really exploring this. They were very much ahead of the curve and, was able to, look at the ingredients and see what, begin to put it together. And I was so shocked that I had vaccinated my children. Some of them had gotten the MMR, for instance, that at that time I thought had the DNA of an aborted little boy or little girl. I can't remember now, was it MRC5?
Yeah.
What a name to have. I mean, isn't that sad he never got a name? Or WI38, that little girl. But so I followed it. At that stage, I had stopped vaccinating. But the finding out that put a whole different dimension, because as important as the physical things around vaccines are, I think the spiritual, for me, yes, I mean, it's reprehensible that aluminium or mercury or things like this, formaldehyde, these things are put in vaccines. But it's just, I can't even deal with the situation of using babies. And so that was a revelation to me, and I really looked at that. There wasn't a lot to find out. Anytime something new came up, I would visit, the research again every once in a while, but there wasn't a lot of new stuff coming out. When Debbie Vindage from Children of God for Life, on behalf of a mother concerned about this issue and what she was she wanted vaccines that did not have this, but she wanted to know where she as a Catholic stood. Debbie contacted the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. At the time, the head of it was Cardinal Ratzinger, who was later Pope Benedict. And because she was English speaking, the person that answered the phone was Monsignor Brown, who later became our papal nuncio, Archbishop Charles Brown. And he was as Debbie describes it, he was in shock. He had no idea. They had never heard a whisper about the fact that aborted babies were being used for vaccination. And he spent a long time on the phone with her and even told her, helped her to formulate the question in the right way so it would get a really full answer. She did that, submitted it in 2003, and in 2005, they wrote a response. And this is the response that everything that has followed from the Vatican comes from. So it's very important to go back to 2005. And the response talks about this as a terrible evil.
Yeah.
An evil. It talks about the fact that it's something the church must fight against and that people must rise up against this, fight against it. It's a powerful document. And it says that there are different levels of responsibility. And obviously the scientist who takes the child's body parts or the child's dead body and does this has the greatest responsibility. And the manufacturers who use the cell lines made from aborted babies have very frontline responsibility. And then it talks about a more remote responsibility, but nowhere in that document does it say, except for being purely ignorant of it, that you just don't know, like when I, vaccinated my kids with MMR, they said there is no, obviously there's no responsibility with no knowledge, because knowledge is essential for responsibility for sin. But they said it's more remote. Now so, as I say, nowhere does it say it's a good.
Yeah.
It's just more remote responsibility to say for a parent in the face of a very serious threat to their child's health, who uses it, that that the responsibility is remote and it could be permissible in that, there's no intended link to the abortion, which happened a long time ago. They thought it was one abortion.
Yeah.
They thought it was, and they were being told that the diseases this was supposed to protect were life-threatening. So they're not doctors. They were theologians, and they were being told this. And so anyway, under very serious threat, the responsibility is very remote. It never says there's no responsibility, but it's more remote to even the point of being permissible in a very serious threat.
So those are two words, just to bring us up to the current situation. Those are two words that we hear over and over again, is remote and permissible. And that's now with the most recent statements from our own Irish bishops, and again, the doctrine of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith in its morality statement just before Christmas. They don't seem to emphasize what you were saying, which was the main thrust of that early document.
No, the main thrust, that's just on the last page. It's a several page letter. The evil of it.
Yeah.
The fact that it must be stopped, and we must, it had to become part of the pro-life cause.
That was the thrust of the document, and yet we've only taken the last sort of part of it, which is.
And we haven't even taken the last, because after it gives his little concession with a very serious threat, the last paragraph is that this needs more study.
Okay. So this way back in 2003, they said this needs more study.
This was 2005 when it came out. So the conclusion of it is it needs more study. The conclusion was not that, anybody can do it, and in fact, you have a moral responsibility to have it. The conclusion is this needs more study. So we'll move on to 2008, because that is the heavy duty, document that then everything else gets based on. But what happened is, and I was very familiar with the 2008 document, which is called Dignitas Personae, so the dignity of the person. Because when I became an MEP in 2004, the leading pro-life issue in the parliament was the embryo and the fetus. Protecting the embryo with stem cell research, embryonic stem cell research, cloning, chimera, where you're going to mix human embryos with animals, etc. You know, the advanced therapies, the biomedical, you know, all these new ethical questions. And we were in the parliament for 5 years, and this was the top card on the deck for, in terms that, you know, in terms of disability, it was the beginning rumblings of euthanasia and stuff. But in terms of this sort of pro-life ethical, that was it. And I was back and forth to the Vatican twice. I met the Vatican at the UN in Geneva, all in connection with this work. I spoke at a conference in just outside the Vatican, and a Monsignor attended and asked, could he speak with me? And we had a real discussion about what was going. I met with Bishop Noel Trainer when he was head of Camise. He met with, you know, we were the lead MEPs in this issue, and he met with us, and I was so impressed with the diligence and the thorough treatment of these issues of the embryo and the fetus and all of this. I was just, you know, really impressed, and everything they put out was a great document. So, and a great resource for me. So in 2008, they put out this, and each section is dealing with like embryonic stem cell, IVF, chimera research, you know, so you had them all numbered. And really, you know, intrinsic evil, you know, like it's really well worked out. And then the very last section kind of tacked on like the tail on, pin the tail on the donkey, is a cut and paste from the 2005 letter, minus most of it. It's just literally the language straight out of the 2005 letter about vaccination. And really, all it really included, it left out the bit about this needs more study. It was just that in the face of a very severe threat, it's section 34 in that document, and a very severe threat, it could be permissible. It isn't definitely permissible. It could be permissible for a parent to give a vaccine. And I have to stress here too, the Vatican did not know, and we only know since those undercover Planned Parenthood videos done by Daniel Daleiden, that in fact, some of the research required live aborted babies. That, you know, it was Daniel Daleiden and his crew with the Planned Parenthood undercover videos that were able to expose the fact that they were actually booking babies, not any baby, young, healthy mothers, healthy pregnancies, normal babies, and they were there at the abortion clinic to collect them, and the abortion procedures were being changed so that the baby would, if possible, be born alive, aborted alive, I should say, or just died so that they could get what they needed within 5 minutes of death. We didn't know that. The Vatican still doesn't know that, but we know it now. And
I emphasize that. I think I just want to really make that clear to people listening, because people listening are hearing all sorts of things. What you're saying is, and what's well known, and it's been testified in American courts, is
yes,
there are the babies. It's a premeditated abortion, and in order to have the quality of the cells, the baby needs to be, these parts need to be taken from the baby before it even dies. With that, I've heard
preferably, you know, sometimes the baby has just died. And the thing is, that's not for every use of aborted babies. I mean, aborted babies are have been used for cosmetics. They're used for taste testing, to test flavors, smells. But for some applications, if you're going to create a cell line, a blockbuster cell line that's going to make your company hundreds of millions, billions over decades, you need living cells.
Yeah.
You can't take a baby that was aborted last week, and you don't want a baby that was miscarried, because often there would be something wrong. You don't want a baby of someone who takes drugs. And you don't want any anesthetic to have affected those cells. So when that baby is taken, preferably live, and when that baby is dissected, sometimes live, if they can keep the baby alive, that baby has no anesthetic. I mean, they already had no anesthetic for the abortion.
I want people to be absolutely clear, because this has not been brought to light. It doesn't seem to have got through to, like you say, the Vatican or our bishops, because what we keep hearing is this was one isolated abortion in the 1970s. And I think that we need to be crystal clear that there is an absolute industry going on here, and that even in the case of the HEK 293, we know that 293 means 293 experiments.
Yes, and there were 8 transfections, which is a very now 293.
Yeah.
And it's HEK, human embryonic kidney, but embryos don't have kidneys formed yet. So it's a human fetal. It was even misnamed. It should have been HFK.
Yeah.
And 293, you're right. That's 293 experiments. No lab does 293 experiments in one day. You work 9 to 5, you take breaks. So they needed for 293, we don't know at this stage. Someday the research papers will be opened up 50 years from now, and we will discover how many babies there were. But
Yeah.
the idea that it was one baby back in the 70s, and it was a dead baby and their body was used, and that's terrible. But,
See,
we're not talking about that for a cell line. Cell lines are too valuable to, and you just won't get a cell line from dead cells.
Yeah. And I think, we've heard that moral argument before. We've heard it on the Irish airwaves, that, the equation to slavery, and, would you walk over a bridge that was built by slaves? And it's like a completely, a nonsensical argument, because slavery, as you pointed out in a previous interview, thank God, has been abolished and is firmly in the past.
And is condemned,
But this is something that's real time, and this is something that this whole industry is built upon. And as you said before, it was big business back in the European Parliament, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when they knew that the cutting edge research would involve
aborted babies.
An absolute conflict of interests here going on.
Yeah, and the amount of lobbying we got, I mean, there was no money spared. But it's important to understand that when Daniel de Leiden, the Center for Medical Progress, and you can go on their website and see the videos and see the court testimony where they admit to what he had discovered. They are justifying abortion. When those videos came out, Planned Parenthood denied everything, and the media supported that. And then we started to see articles, you can find them, one from a Boston research university, various, hospitals and researchers coming out and supporting Planned Parenthood, basically saying, if you don't let us, because the Trump administration was taking action against the use of aborted babies, because it was illegal as well as anything else, it's trafficking. And these research centers were saying, oh, you're going to shut down medical progress. We need abortion in order to make medical progress. So this isn't slavery roundly condemned, a war fought in America over it, lots of political action everywhere else. And it's over, thanks be to God, and we must teach our children that history so that it never happens again. No, this is an evil practice of killing babies, premeditatedly selecting suitable abortions, suitable babies, using them for the cell lines. Now, they'd be less selective for other applications, but that is still going on. And now they are attempting to justify abortion on the fact that they're needed for medical progress. They're needed to save lives. And you know, Lisa, the Lancet recently published figures, I think they were for 2019, that worldwide there was 73.3 million abortions worldwide in, I think it's 2018 or 2019. And that doesn't count the silent ones from abortifacient contraception or IVF embryos, extra IVF embryos, or anything. That's just the ones, or abortion pill where they don't know. This is just the abortions where you went and a doctor did it, or in some countries, some nurses do it. That's 73.3 million in 1 year. This is not slavery that was condemned and stopped 200 years ago, and the bridge is still there.
Thanks for watching. Please remember that we at HLI Ireland are working and praying for an Ireland where God is first, life is sacred, and the family is cherished. God bless.